Mercedes, I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Yes.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. So what's interesting is in this film, you're directing someone else's script. So
Yes.
is that freeing for you or can that confine you?
I love it because I think that with the script in particular, I go, this is Josh's world that he's telling, but I can also bring my own things to it. And so something that I really wanted to bring to the script is just kind of this female gaze to it. And I went, okay, we need to have equal nudity of all genders, and things that weren't in there originally is Sage fakes her orgasm in the script. And that's something that wasn't there. But I said, what's something tangible that we can see that is just shows that they're having an issue in the relationship subtextually without them saying it until it comes out in the end. And so there's just parts of that I was able to work with that and ingrain into it with him.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I like you could still put part of your taste on the story even though you're directing it.
Yeah.
Really cool. And it's interesting. I'm wondering, when you're doing a film like this, is it still, do you run a tight set or is it more loose? Like, what are you about time?
So tight. This movie was shot in a very little amount of time. And so I had it completely shot listed beforehand where I would come in and go, okay, we're over here. We're going up the staircase. We're putting the axe in that body part. Then we're coming in and having this really intense conversation. And I feel like with an indie movie like this, the way that we're able to get creative shots is by planning.
Right.
And if we don't plan, can't do it.
So that's interesting you say that too, because I just watched a show where the showrunner was talking about where some of the directors working on the show, he didn't feel like they were valuing people's time. So do you value that though in the rest of your career, that like not only for just budget terms and studio, but for your actors? Like, are you aware like, hey, let's get this going?
Yeah, it's valuing people's time, and it's also just, safety first, because at the end of the day, we're making a movie. I've had times where when I was driving home from set, I would fall asleep at the wheel, and that's very scary. And so just making sure that we're okay so that we can keep making movies and be okay in our lives is very important.
Yeah, I love that answer. And it's cool that you're like that. And I'm wondering too, this is something I always wonder with directors, when you're watching these scenes over and over again, how do you feel like though you're still able to look at it like the audience would with fresh eyes? How do you separate that?
Yeah, so I'm actually a huge fan of test screenings. And so because I feel like after I've watched something 500 times, I can't tell what plot twists are working or not. To me, it doesn't even sound like they're speaking English anymore because I've watched it so many times. And so what I'll do is I'll sit down with all different people, most of them horror lovers, some of them not, and I'll just sit back and listen. And I just say, what was working for you? What didn't? What did you guess? What characters do you like or not? And so I wanted to make this movie for people. And so that was really helpful in that process.
That's interesting you bring up test screenings too, because I was actually just listening to a commentary of Scott Derrickson, and he was saying he values test screenings for confusion, that people get confused by stuff. So have you ever come up with that where someone tells you that?
Of course. Something that you think is, you would just go, of course that makes sense. Someone will go, I don't get that. And sometimes it's stripping away information and sometimes it's adding. But the most ridiculous example I can think of it is you watch Wizard of Oz and they say, follow the yellow brick road probably 50 times. You go, that's the goal.
Right.
That's what they're telling people. And sometimes people just need to be told something again.
Yeah. No. That's makes total sense. And I love that you're doing horror, and I have a special place in my heart for horror, but it's so popular. So that makes it this crowded market. So are you aware of that in the sense of, like, is there anything for this film in particular you wanted to, like, make sure you stand out? Like, how would you go about that?
I think it's the fact that we're also bringing erotic thrillers back with it. And, we're horror. We have a similar setup to some other horror films, but also we're sexy and are erotic. And that's something where I go, that separates us.
Yeah, no, and I think it totally does work that way, and it made me curious about watching it, and I think it totally pays off too. And was there anything you learned new about, not maybe just yourself while directing this film, but yourself as a director that may be like, oh, I can do this, or maybe I don't want to do this anymore? Anything like that?
I think it was feeling good about the choice to make it comedic. And it's something that I've always loved, things that are comedic, but I've kind of just, each movie, I've kind of been able to do that a little bit more. Yeah. And so being able to do that with this one, I kind of just went, oh, this is who I am. And it just feels really good to have that matchup.
So would you agree with a lot of people who say that even you're doing horror, but is comedy even more challenging than horror in a way?
Yeah, I think so. I think, people talk about the death of comedy nowadays. And I think it's kind of a nice pairing with horror because we're able to understand other genres to kind of seep us into that. And I think it's horror and comedy are so similar because we're uncomfortable. We laugh because we go, I don't know what's happening, and that was shocking. And so it's a nice way to still have people go to the theaters and watch that.
100%. And with people this Friday going to see this movie coming out this weekend, what would you, if you were a fly on the wall with all these screenings coming out, what do you want them to be feeling the most when they come out of this film? What would put a smile on their face?
I want people to feel a communal experience, because I think that you could watch this in your living room and have a fun time, but hearing someone laugh next to you, it just feels so much better, hearing them gasp and be able to talk about that, but also people going and talking about their own relationships or their exes. And I want people to have a fun time, but then maybe look at their communication skills.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. And just don't watch it with your grandma in the communal experience.
Yeah, unless your grandma's super cool and cooler than everyone else's grandma, then please go watch it with your grandma.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody check out Bone Lake in theaters this Friday. It was such a treat talking to you. I hope talking to you in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thanks,
bye.
Mercedes.
Thank you.